wait for a bit here and maybe we'll get one of Harold, or Harold was coming, wasn't he? Anybody hear from him?
I believe so. I think he was emailing with Janice.
Yeah, because right now we don't have enough for quorum even.
Or was it Gord, maybe? Janice, was it Gord?
Gord was going to be coming. So we're live streaming already.
Okay, we'll just hang on for a moment until we get either Harold or Gord.
Oh, Wendy, I think the terms of reference didn't end up on the agenda.
Was it supposed to go on there?
My understanding is we're supposed to review them once a year. Is that correct?
Yeah. So is this committee not met this year already?
We didn't review them. So I guess the other question is, we've had one meeting, we'll be having this meeting, and then that'll be it for this year. We could review them at the next meeting, which I suspect will be January or February.
Yeah, we can just do it the next meeting.
Oh, there we got Gord.
Might want to consider increasing membership on this committee too, because we do have a few vacancies. So that's something we could discuss under new business if you'd like.
Okay.
Today.
Okay, so I think we're quorum-ish. So I'd like to call this meeting to order and recognize that we are in the traditional territories of the Apetchezit and the Tishat First Nations, and that we consider and honor that. I'd like to ask for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to add to the agenda? No. Okay, all in favor? Sorry.
Mr. Chair, did we want to discuss membership under new business?
Sure. Under new business?
Or, yeah, sure, we could put it there.
Sure. Okay, we'll put it under, we don't have a column for new business on this, but we'll put one in, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So on the agenda with the addition, all in favor? Okay, and so a receipt of the minutes of January 28th, 2020. Is that long ago? Wow. Seems like yesterday. Somebody move the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Anything in the minutes that we need to talk about?
No.
Don't think so. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And a request local service area boundary amendment. I don't quite know how this happened, but we'll find out. Thanks. Go ahead, Jenny.
All right. To the chair. Yeah, it looks like in 2015, we had a water service request for this property, and they did put in a water connection, but it was outside the service, the boundary area. And I think it just got overlooked, which can happen. So they put in a request for a new water connection in early 2019. And then staff shortly realized thereafter that they were outside the boundaries. So we have 2 water connections going to them. They haven't paid parcel tax, but that's, I don't think we can do anything about that, but it would be nice to bring them into the water system so that they are charged for parcel taxes.
Well, it's my recollection that this actually did come to the board, and back then, I haven't checked the minutes or whatever, but this property sure rings a bell. From asking for service at that point. I'm not quite sure how that all. One would think that they would have been informed at that time that they were going to be required to be in the service area, but I guess we've got no documentation of that at all. I'm sure it came to our meeting. Do you fellas remember that, Gord or?
I don't recall it. It sounds familiar, but I really don't recall much about it.
So this is right at the end of Bainbridge Road and just at the border of Beaufort. So, but it was not in our service area. They were building another house and are subdividing the property as well, and so really it's a mystery. So anyhow, any discussion on this? Anybody got any questions with regards to it? Somebody'd like to make a motion there? Or Pam, did you have a question?
No, you've proceeded. You're going to present the motion. Go ahead.
Okay, somebody want to move that motion or we've got as a recommendation?
I will.
Okay.
We got two.
Go ahead, you move it, I'll second it.
We could back up the camera and see who said that first.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. We got to move her in a second. Or is there any questions with regards to this? Any more discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so this one might have a little more discussion to it, I would hope. So with regards to the pump house on Mckenzie Road. So Jenny, you want to take that?
Yeah, so this has been an item since I arrived, and what it is, obviously the old pump station that used to be the supply of water for the system has been sitting for a while, and it used to have gas chlorine that's been taken out for liability reasons. And we haven't been doing, I would say, definitely not adequate maintenance to make sure that the facility's up to snuff so that we could turn it on and use it. It's also missing chlorination. There's quite a few things. And so we wanted to really look at, okay, if we want to keep the station as a backup, what are the costs going to be? And if not, we should consider decommissioning it. Again, what are the costs? Just so we can make some better decisions. So we asked Coors Engineering to come out and do a full assessment, and they did. Basically, the immediate upgrades required are in the range of $294,000, and that is just to get it going immediately. Now, that will only get us about 3 or 5 years, and at that time, we really have to look at doing some more investment in order to keep the facility. And that's very expensive as well, over $500,000. So to keep the facility as an adequate backup will be a total of $861,000. And then we also have to consider the ongoing maintenance costs, which would be about $10,000 just for doing the maintenance, supplies, labor, all of those things, and the capital cost replacement of about $40,000. The other option is to decommission the facility, and that means actually removing the building, remediating the site, and walking away. And the cost for that is $200,000. So it really comes down to what we would like to do with this facility. I know there's been discussion on keeping it as a backup or maybe for some other purpose. So this is a valuable exercise to look at. And however, I would like to say that when we were looking at this as a backup and when we look at our water emergency response plan, we say, okay, so when is this going to, when would this facility come into play in an emergency? And so we sort of run through the scenarios. And if we consider that there is a catastrophic emergency that would take out all 3 of the city's water sources so that the city water supply is no longer available to them or to us, or even just to us, at that level of emergency, we're pretty sure that there's going to be catastrophic damage to the Beaver Creek water system, making this additional backup supply probably not viable. Now, we don't know because we never know how things will play out in an emergency, but we're looking at probabilities. So there is a low likelihood of needing this facility, essentially. In that regard, as far as a backup for the system goes, that's a considerable investment in order to have a backup that will be there for a very low chance, right? Low probability event. So I think staff are recommending that we decommission the facility, and that's in the best interest of the Beaver Creek water system. it's cost effective and it makes the most sense. I think that really there probably needs to be just some discussion. So maybe I'll just stop at that point and hand it over to the committee for discussion.
Okay, anybody want to dig into that?
Well,
Go ahead, Gord.
well, I'm just looking at some of the points they've made there. Okay, I know the generator has kind of been toast. The batteries blew up and it's been left, so that's probably gone, and it probably wasn't the best investment to start with. But they didn't accept my other proposal on that. But anyway, I don't know what would be involved for updating the SCADA controls for the short term, but in the long term, I just got a question as to why do they have replacing the 3 pumps? They went in December of 2009, I believe it was, and we haven't used them that much, so I don't know what's going on there. But it's I see it's a very costly thing to deal with. I think it takes a lot of thought. My concern is that to lose the license and a water source, everything, we're all hoping that nothing really happens to the city one, but if something does happen there, is there an alternative in mind for water from somewhere else? One thing I want to point out is they talk about we can always get water from the pump station just above Paper Mill Dam. To put it bluntly, that's a real backward step for the people at Beaver Creek, because 35 or 40 years ago, it was turned down building a pump house above that. And there was a discussion between that and a source off the mountain for the winter, and that got turned down. One of the questions I had to the engineer is, what's the water quality like there compared to where a pump station is? His answer to me was, the water quality is the same. We just have to chlorinate it more if we take it from there. And we all know what heavily chlorinated water does to us. So I I really hate to see a water source eliminated for us, because who knows what's going to happen. I do realize that's an awful pile of money in there for something that are we going to need, or are we not going to need? Nobody knows. So I think it's a pretty tough decision to totally eliminate it. But like I say, I see it's awfully expensive. Maybe the decision's got to be looked at deeper. I don't know.
Harold.
Question first, Jenny, you said the city has 3 water sources. Can you clarify that for me, please?
Yeah, there is the Paper Mill Dam one that Gord mentioned, as well as Bainbridge and China Creek.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing I should mention is,
okay,
as far as Paper Mill Dam goes as a source, I think it's only ever there as an emergency. So it would only be temporary, until which time that the original source, which is China Creek, could be reinstated.
okay. Okay, yeah, I do want to make some comments, because they suggested before was to maintain the ability or whatnot for as a water source there for emergencies. And that's catastrophic type emergencies you're talking about. Fire was one that was mentioned, and that's not such far-fetched thinking when you consider how we're totally surrounded by recently harvested woodlands with young growth, and the drying, our climate change and drying conditions. Basically, Bainbridge it's an alternate source, that's right, and it's a backup for high turbidity levels, but China Creek's the main one for the city. It is in a valley, very steep sided valley, right adjacent. It draws from a stream that's extremely flashy during high rain periods. In fact, I'm absolutely amazed at the levels that stream achieves sometimes. And it's not that long ago where they had a rock slide right before the entrance to the pump house, which knocked that unavailable for a number of days before they were able to reestablish it. But with all the recent harvesting that's happened now, and way up where timber had never been harvested before, right from the mountaintop or ridgeline down to the valley bottom, there is potential possibility with extreme weather events of having excessive slides and debris flows, which can travel long distances and create a lot of damage. I do think the ability to access source of water in an emergency type of situation, we should maintain the ability in some fashion to access them. I'm not suggesting it be maintained for supplying potable water even at that point, but if the infrastructure, the piping, pumps or whatnot are available to use. In fact, I had a question about the city's facility on the Stamp River. Is their pump still available there or not? I have no idea the status of that facility right now, but I know the intake is still out on the river. So, with climate change and the concern about the interface fires and whatnot, there might be some funding available there. I mean, your own government has a department, you know, as staff has been increased to deal with emergency situations. So I think it really needs to work with the city and with the district as a whole to resolve this question or suggestion. That's my take.
Good points, Harold. Good points. Pam?
Yes, thank you very much for bringing those forward, Harold. For me, my instinct is always to be over-prepared. And I know this is a heck of a large bill, but if we were into situations such as Harold has referred to, we would be grasping for that source. So I really struggle to impose on the taxpayer another huge bill, but I think who knows what we're going to face down the road. We would not have that access that quickly. So it really concerns me. So
my take on this is like Harold. I'm not looking to supply potable water if we have an emergency situation that requires us to look for another water source. I'm thinking that we would be looking at just supplying water, both for fire flows and for emergency use. The other point here is we were recently talking about water for farming use, and I don't think we within this report have actually looked at that. I mean, that pump station is certainly something that could be utilized in some form or fashion for either pump and haul or some sort of extra piping system that might be federally or provincially funded. So I think we really need to look into that and make sure that we're clear of that. I think this needs a little more away from the engineers, but into the sort of society kind of discussion, because once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, the big deal there is the water license, and you know, I don't think we need to keep that pump station in a immediate turn switch kind of condition. I think we need to keep it so that it's within 24 hours of being able to fire up and forget about the chlorine part of it. Just it's water, and So I don't know. I really think that we need to kind of go back and look at all of the bigger picture items that the engineer hasn't talked about, and then deal with this. If it's a budgetary issue, we can still get it into the 2020 budget, and even if we put it in provisionally, it can still be part of the picture, at least a primary kind of role on it, I think. So I don't know if you got any more to add to that, Jenny.
Yeah, I've made some notes through all of the comments. Thank you so much, because this is such an important topic to discuss. And from a staff perspective, it is nice to get some direction on where we want to go with this. So from what I'm hearing, obviously, there is the first thing which we looked at specifically in the report, which was to do with having a backup for the water supply system. Now, a lot of the discussion is talking about not specifically the water system and having a backup so that water gets to homes, but more about an emergency source of water for interface fires, for agricultural purposes, which really are valuable things to consider. But this was looked at from a water utility perspective. And I think that when it comes to funding, I would want to look at potentially grants or other sources of funding if the purpose is not specifically, right? Like maybe a portion is for the, will provide benefit to the water system users. But if there's a broader benefit for other reasons, we should really consider looking at funding it from those other services. I don't think that there's adequate information here to talk about whether this would be a good, what level of protection this provides for interface forests for emergency preparedness. I think that more information needs to be gathered to answer that. What additional, like how beneficial this would be for that.
Okay, Harold?
In that discussion, there is a potential third source, and they should be part of the discussion, and that is the Catalyst Paper Facility. Their water license actually has more than adequate capacity for their current operating needs. I don't know if they're still maintained at the same level, but it's a large infrastructure that they do have. But there has to be agreements established and plans, or emergency plans are not outlined as to what to do if that need arose.
Yeah, the regional district has actually gone down that road with the city to create a platform of discussion with regards to implementing their that system as a backup and as a primary source as well. So
yep. That
hasn't. I don't think, Jenny, you've been involved in any of that, but it was prior to your coming aboard.
But remember, many people still remember that source was wiped out in the tsunami.
Yep, exactly. So the other thing with regards to the city's capability of providing emergency water, it's my understanding that the water pickup is on the Somas River versus up on the Paper Mill Dam one. I think that they're actually drawing from River Road, like halfway down River Road where Josephine is. Mm-hmm. So the water quality at that point, and the water is very tidal there, and it has a fairly large concentration of sea water as well. So using Mckenzie Road as a backup for the whole of the system, I think would have a lot more viability. I mean, it's the water volume is much higher than the Somas River, and it's a bit like I don't want to say cleaner, but it's a much more natural source. Yeah. So I think that all kind of needs to be brought into the discussion, and with the city as well. Because this whole concept of being able to supply water in an emergency was part of our discussion when we went to the city water system and to the Strict Road pump house. So, I mean, we did make facilities there to be able to switch over. And so it was, you know, in the thought process at that time. So, I mean, I don't think we need to do anything today other than maybe receive this for information and let's go forward and include a few more people involved in it. And yes, got Jenny and then Harold.
Yeah, just adding to what John said there, and a bit of a correction I'd like to suggest is I believe where the city's SOMAS intake is just above the normal high tidal level. But I do know during the tsunami that went further up. But the influence of the salt water is a totally different topic. But the salt water does go that as far as Paper Mill Dam. And the evidence of that has been the sanitary waste odor that's been noticed up there on occasions in the summertime. And it's the nature of the mixing of salt water with a freshwater layer on top. The haleocline actually goes a long ways up. It's just the dynamics of that. I've had experience in my past when I was working in a submersible and inspecting the pilings on what was the wooden pilings on the pulp mill dock. Once they'd put in treatment systems for their effluent and the water started getting cleaned up, we started to get attack of teredos way down at the mud line on the pilings supporting that dock. And I've been down in a submersible, and it's absolutely incredible. At that time, the craft mill was running. But for about the first 15 feet, it was like going through dark coffee. And then a very distinct boundary, it was green, blue-green seawater below, which is the salt water. That's how defined the boundary layer is between the saltwater layer and the fresh water. And that salt water goes way up the river. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm like today. I am today because I was a diver at the time about in the 70s and 70s to 80s, and I actually dove in the inlet, and it actual like just a line. You know, you go down about 8-10 feet, and you couldn't see anything, and then below that it was clear.
Yeah.
Jenny, you had a comment?
Yeah. All really great information. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking from a practical next steps perspective that we need to really investigate the potential use of this pump station for an emergency preparedness asset, as well, separate or similar but different, is investigate the value of utilizing the facility for as like an agricultural water source asset as well. And when I'm looking at that, I'm seeing that that's going to take some time. For starters, I think that both of those, I'll have to look at how we fund looking at those studies, how those get accomplished. And practically speaking, because of the amount of groups that we're going to have involved in that, the process is probably going to take quite a while. I would anticipate this would be another year before we could come back to discuss this item again or have anything of value in hand. The process would, of course, involve, I'm sure, some of you or all of you as we look into that. But what I'm really saying is that I see that this is going to be a fairly long process. And as a intermediate step, we're going to have to just do a little bit of work in that facility to take out some of the liability. So that is, I don't think that's a bad thing, and it's not undoable moving forward. Like it, in a way, it is a step towards decommissioning, but it's just to reduce the liability, and we would have to replace a lot of things anyhow. So from a staff perspective, next, well, if not late this year, but early next year, in the next few months, we're going to go in and just clean up the facility, lock it down so that it's tight, because I'm a little worried right now that we do have a sitting liability. That'll give us breathing room for looking at how we fund this what the value is, all of those questions, which I think are valid. But I do, one of the things I wanted to mention is that this is not a turnkey operation, and it can't be unless we sink a bit of money in right now anyhow. And it sounds to me like we're not yet ready to do that until there's confirmation that we know how the value that it will receive, how it will be funded, all of those things. I think if we're looking outside of just water, there could be funding opportunities available, which is good because we have so much renewal and replacement that we need to fund out of the water system already, that it would be nice to try and find other sources of funding if we want to keep this on side. So yeah, I guess that's the last thing I wanted to say.
So one thing I didn't mention that I had thought of before is we're dealing with two layers of government here too. We're dealing with the city of Port Alberni, and we're dealing with the regional district. We don't know in the future if we're going to have the relationship with the city of Port Alberni that we do today. You know, we may get individuals in there that are completely against joint service, and you know, we may someday down the line have to look at alternatives, and so eliminating this alternative puts us negotiating wise in not a real good position. Gord, did you have a comment?
Yes. As far as the water source off the Somash River, I think that's something to stay away from. And even giving any thought to me of spending money or looking at water out of Sprout Lake with what goes on out there and what's happening out there, I think that's a bad move. With what we got here, Jenny, the short-term cost there, just to keep it there, so like what has been discussed, it could be used in an emergency. The installation of the sodium hypochlorite, would that really be necessary for right now? And also the replacement of the infiltration gallery, would that be something that would have to be done to get any use out of it? It looks like the meter has to be replaced. The SCADA controls for what's going to happen there, I wouldn't think to have to be, but for this short-term emergency use kind of thing, and servicing of the 3 water pumps. Now, I don't know whether the guys get time to exercise them now and then, just so they run a little bit and aren't seizing up for what it takes there. Would that really looking closely at the short-term one, is there some things that really don't have to be done in that $294,000 immediately, or?
To be at all valid points, we do not do regular maintenance checks on this facility. If we did, we are going to need more staff time to add that to our preventative maintenance program. It hasn't been done. I don't know if there is value in doing that unless we actually put in a capital investment, because we can go through the detailed list, and it would probably be valuable to actually pull cores in here if you wanted to get into the details of what the value is for each of these. I actually do trust that their assessment is fairly accurate on what would be required in order to bring it online as an emergency non-potable system. The chlorine is partly, it's not that expensive to install a sodium hypochlorite system. We already use hypo throughout the system, so it'd be interchangeable. And even though it won't, we would still have to issue a boil water because we don't have, you know, the ongoing system to say that the quality is for sure potable. As long as we're putting chlorine into it before we put it into the system, it's so much better than putting raw water into the water system. By all means, I don't recommend that because it is a potable water system. So I think that's worth the investment, is to have the chlorine, if we're going to keep it as a backup, to use in the system. The infiltration gallery, I think that was part of the issues, was that we were, again, I would have to really pull cores in to get into the details of that. But yeah, I would say that if we're not going to move forward with some capital investment to improve it right now, which I don't think is warranted, then I also don't recommend that we go in and maintain it. We just check on it just to make sure that there's been no break-ins or anything, but not to invest the time to maintain it unless we want to actually bring it back on. and
Yeah,
keep
it'd be
it.
nice to be able to look after it to the point where we don't totally lose those
Yeah.
3 pumps. Because like I say, they were brand new in December of 2009 when we did the upgrade there, everything. So that's one thing there. But the infiltration gallery was on the books a long time ago to be replaced. I know that. So, but depending on what the operation is going to be of it, is that really necessary now? Is what I'm saying. But in order to not ash can the whole project and totally eliminate it, like there's a lot of feeling that we should have a backup there, because what can happen is who knows, and to let it disappear, I think would be a terrible mistake on our part for the future of the valley, the district, and everything else. That at one time we had a water license at Great Central Lake, but the district let that go, kind of thing too. So, but more thought, more discussion needs to come. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, I've got Harold.
I do have a question. I don't know if it may not be able to answer it because this is a public meeting or whatnot, but the land ownership status and the arrangement that exists there. I don't know what that situation is right now, where the pump house is.
As far as I understand, we do have the right of way and a lease, and we pay $1. And I think there might have been some issues in the past, but I don't know of any currently where there's concerns.
No, currently we're back to status quo on it. So the legal issues have been settled.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I don't know exactly what we can do with this. Receive it for information at the moment and have staff continue to gather information around it. I think is that where you're heading with that, Jenny, or you want some temporary direction?
I actually don't think I need it. I think I can work on this on an operational level.
Okay. So motion to receive.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Now we'll go on to the next one, which is the Unidirectional Flashing program.
Oh.
I don't quite understand this, but I guess I'm going to.
I don't either. So.
All right. So thank you. Unidirectional flushing is a really neat technique. So right now we go and we turn on the water at some of our dead ends because our chlorine residuals drop, right? And the chlorine residuals drop because we add chlorine to the system, and then as it sits in the water, there's always residual organics, right? So we treat it, it's been disinfected at the source, and it goes into the water system. But that organic matter is still in the water, of course, right? And it will continue over time as the chlorine dissipates. It's very volatile. It'll continue to eat up that demand as long as the organic is in the system, which it does. And it also settles. And so you get this buildup. It's non-pathogenic, but it is organic material and some inorganics like just sediments and rocks. And it all ends up in your pipes. If we have a big fire event, you turn on a fire hydrant and you get this whoosh of very dirty water, right? So what they found is over the years, as we're getting better and better maintenance practices in water systems, and unidirectional flushing has been around for 20, 30 years, right? But if you're just flushing the dead ends, you're flowing out a lot of water at low flow. And what it does is it brings in fresh water that has recently had chlorine added so that you get a chlorine residual again. That's great. But you're not getting any of the buildup in the pipes that have been sitting there. So it continues to very quickly, again, erode the chlorine residual. So unidirectional flushing is really fun because what you do is you basically get as long of a strip of pipe as you can, you close the valves, and you turn on the fire hydrants, and you get it the biggest flow you can. And so when you've got really high velocities going through, it actually scours the inside of the pipe, but it has to be a high velocity. And so it'll clean out the sides of the pipe just through the motion of basically pulling. It's almost, you know what I mean? Like it actually kind of scours it. So then all of that material is actually out of the system. So you're doing kind of like a full clean on the water system. Then you get way more time in between, or like your chlorine residuals in your dead ends, they'll last forever. Water quality, it goes up. It's generally just really good practice to do. You don't necessarily need to do it every year, and it depends on your source water. So if we were, because China Creek and the turbidity coming into the system is relatively low, it will take a very long time for this to build up. And we do end up, as we've discussed, on Bainbridge periodically, which has higher turbidity for a short period of time, and that's not great. It would be nice to do a unidirectional flush once to see how well it cleans the system, and then we determine how often we need to do a unidirectional flush. And of course, like anything, you want to sort of start at one end, which is the beginning of the system where we get our water, and then you just kind of like wash all the pipes through and clean it out as you go. And you sort of just work your way through the system, pushing all of the dirty water through. The pipes get scoured, 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 and you move forward and you basically flush out all the water, and you do that once. I suspect, especially since we recently did the reservoir cleaning, so we kind of know what our buildup is relative to other systems, we could get away with once every 3 to 5 years. However, it is an excellent idea. It is a relatively affordable process. Even though it is a lot of water to waste, you're doing it very effectively. So because of the high velocity, you're using it. We will be able to do less flushing, which is less time for the guys standing at the dead ends, and less water loss. But we won't know in practice until it's completely done. There's a cost to this though, because it has to be designed. So you have to sit down with each, like if you think of the water map, right? And you have to literally say, okay, we're going to take the water from point A and we're going to push it through to point C. And so you have to say, okay, well, we've got to close this valve and this valve and this valve and open this hydrant. And then we're going to open up this valve and close this valve. And then so you kind of have to like piecemeal move it through the system. It's a very detailed plan. And it would just be, Matt could do it, but we'd have to dedicate his time to go to a course and get trained and then sit down to do it for a long period of time. It's going to be more effective if we use one of the consulting firms who've done this for other systems. So it's common. A lot of water systems do this. So we've got a quote of about $17,000 to get that, basically the plan. We never have to spend it again. We can always do it the same way and always follow the plan. So we think that we can incorporate it into the preventative maintenance program, basically offset on like when we're doing our reservoir cleaning and other work. And so it could be incorporated into time, but we'll probably need to add in labor just for coverage. So we need to have 2 people dedicated to do the flushing program. It'll take 2 to 3 weeks. So we'll have to ask, we'll just bring the laborer on for an additional 3 weeks for the first time that we do the program, and we'll take a look at it. So I'm sure that I've explained that in detail because I really like unidirectional flushing. I think it's like a really smart and snappy way to clean out the water system.
Is there any risk of collapse, like main collapse, or especially with the AC pipe areas?
I hear what you're saying. It doesn't create a vacuum per se, but it does scour.
Okay, so when the fire trucks are on, they're actually like a lift pump. So that's where the problem comes. Okay. Anybody else got any questions on that?
When that's taking, what?
Sorry, that's good. You're on, Gord.
When that's taking place, Jenny, are people still drawing water from the system, or they are? So you don't end up, you could end up with some of that stuff in your house system.
You can. And so what we do is you have to make notifications, right? So we notify people that we're doing a unidirectional flushing program, which may stir up sediments for all these reasons. So if you get some turbid water, run for X number of times. Similar messaging that we would give for after a fire event, right? Where people call in and complain about dirty water in sediments in the water.
Okay, and Harold.
Yeah, I have a question on it, and I'm wondering if this technique is used in other rural distribution systems where there's, I know we've had concern in the past about the chlorine in the water and possible effects it would have on the receiving waters, the salmon-bearing streams.
So
Yeah, so,
We use sodium thiosulfate, which basically, so that all the water that comes out has to go into a dechlorination chamber because we
Okay.
can't put any water to the environment that has chlorine in it. So
Okay.
the sodium thiosulfate reacts and neutralizes it.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so we got a motion there. Somebody want to tackle that? Pam?
I move that we, okay, go ahead, Pam.
I'm
The
quick.
The motion is that the Beaver Creek Water Advisory support the development and implementation of a unidirectional flushing program.
Okay.
Okay, I've got a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Carried. Okay, now we got our capital program. Jenny.
Excellent.
We
Moving
could have
on.
just pre-recorded this.
This is also a really fun one. We've been really great with the capital program before I got here. Since I've been here, it's been excellent. We've been really lucky to use the community works funding, and that there's been reserves saved up enough to do almost a kilometer of water main for the last 3 years. Or actually this year we did quite a bit more even, right, with Fayette and Lamarck. And that's awesome. It has helped tremendously. We're seeing lower flows in the winter in the nighttime, so that's good. We're getting less breaks, and that's exactly what we expect, and we love to see that. So we want to continue to move forward with that. There was the 2017 infrastructure assessment that was completed that basically prioritized all the water mains, and that's done by looking at the age, how often they break, material type. And then the other thing too is, and this happens, right? There was a switch to sort of the minimum required water line size. And so we have a lot of 100 millimeter water line, but we want sort of the minimum size to be 150 millimeters. That's just sort of your minimum, and it helps. We don't have a lot of demand within the system, so it could be argued whether we're meeting fire flow or not, but we always have to meet the minimum. So we've got a huge list, and we are getting through it. And so in the last few years, we've had the ability to update some of the condition assessments. That's when we have a break. We look at what the water line looks like, or if we're digging down for any reason. And so we get better up-to-date information of what a pipe looks like, because just because of its age and type doesn't always indicate when it's going to fail, right? It varies based on the soil type and everything else. And so it's art and science, but we continue to update it with more information. So what we're looking at right now is our newest priority list. It's great that we were able to just recently switch over that section of Compton and Beaver Creek, because that was one of our highest ones and it was very expensive. And so we did that switch and saved some good money on that. I think that was the highest priority that was shown in the Coors report. And so Karen Place is now identified as the next highest priority, followed by Falls, Georgia Road, and Saunders, Kitsaxis, Smith Road, and Grandview. And so those are just chunks within there that we sort of see as sort of highest priority. Now, we don't have that much money because we've definitely drained the bank, which is what we should do, spend all the money you can on replacing them so that we have less ongoing costs. But we're down to very little money in the capital program. So we're going to have to wait and save up some money to do our next project. So we're looking at 2022 when we believe we'll have enough money available to do Karen Place, which will be the next one. And then we sort of think that every 2 years we should be able to do a water project based on what current parcel taxes are. The alternative is that we can generate more money to do these projects more quickly. And that is where we're at. So based on our current financial plan and the capital that we have, we're looking at a water main project every 2 years.
So one thing I'd like to suggest is that a lot of these grants that come down the stream, so to speak, are table-ready grants. So including really our gas tax expenditures. If we've got like we had the double up gas tax thing last year, but a lot of the stuff, it gets on the table, but it like from other districts particularly, there's money sitting there that hasn't been used because it hasn't been planned. So I would suggest that we basically plan ahead of ourselves. I don't know what the engineering looks like for the Karen Place one, whether or not that's ready, but
We're at
as a,
90%.
pardon me?
We're at 90% design. I hope to have it shelf ready.
Okay. So my job is sitting there trying to get things going for Beaver Creek is to lobby for that, the funding, and because it's table ready, we can sometimes get the money. So I think into the future, that's kind of we should be at least one project ahead with engineering. And so it's ready to go. Somebody shakes the tree and money falls out of it, then we're ready to spend it. And that's, I think, really going to be important in the year of 2021, because the federal government is going to be looking at things like that, where they can get people to work, have projects that are ready to go. And if we're ready to go, then I can get busy and say, hey, this is important. We need to spend the money. Let's do it. So anybody else got any questions on this? Pam?
Jenny, typically when you are making those plans, can you give it an idea of how long those plans take to complete?
When you say plans, you mean the detailed design for
Yeah.
a water main?
Yes.
These ones are fairly straightforward. It's just water main replacement. We could fast track it in 3 months.
Pretty good. It's
Yeah.
good to know.
Harold?
That was a good question. I totally agree. We should have it pre-planned. But how you engage the engineering is important. And have discussions, make sure that they operate there and do their design with a target not to exceed type of thing in terms of costs. Haven't had project experience in the past or whatnot, an engineer, I know that. And I shake my head sometimes when I see the costs for studies that have been done elsewhere in that Victoria area. I just can't believe what's happening in that regard down there. But that's good to plan for these things and be ready, because there will likely be funds available when we get to the stage where we're able to start rebuilding the economy. And that, this COVID thing is going to be with us for a while. There's a lot of damage that has been done, and there will be stimulus for, just for employment. I suspect.
Yeah, and if we get to, say within the year of 2021, if we end up with funding, just to say for both the Falls Road and the Karen Place one, that would really shuffle the deck, and put us in a really positive position for the rest of it. Yeah. So I'll commit to doing my side of it, that's for sure.
Okay.
We spend all the money that's been out there to this point, so that's a good thing.
Yep.
Okay, so we want to receive this, recommend no, we need to make that motion, I think. Somebody want to tackle that?
So moved.
Okay. Seconder? Harold? Any other discussion? Got anything from staff? I see Matthew is sitting there with his mic off, so we're going to put you to work. You realize that?
Can't see him.
No, he's on. He's on,
Yeah.
but his mic's shut off.
He might be working at the moment. So
Okay. Okay, he's pretending he's on. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And that's it, except for
I'm
the
here with
late.
2 more projects.
we got something else here. Hang on a second. Development cost charges. Sorry. When I spun it ahead, it canceled it. Okay, so background, development cost charges.
Yeah, so this was direction from the last Beaver Creek Water Committee, was to look at the DCCs specifically for renovations and see if that was appropriate that it was applied. So we've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of research on this, and I've worked with our planning group. And so we've discussed this. And it's interesting when you dig into it to see what is happening in other municipalities. So because DCCs, especially under the Local Government Act, are applied to construction, renovation, alterations, there's this group, and it's a fixed group, right? So it does include renovations, and it makes sense, right? Because at what point is something a renovation or a construction? And so there's a reason it's grouped together. But it was interesting to hear that typically what municipalities, regional districts do is that they apply the DCCs across the board if a property is doing any of those things. And there is always the exemption, because the intent of a development cost charge is to pay for the upgrades required as a result of that development. And maybe it's not that development, but that development, 5 other developments are going to require us to upgrade that main to make it bigger. This is how I always explain it to people, and they seem to understand that that's reasonable, right? Because otherwise those costs wouldn't be required, and it's not fair that everyone in the system pays for this when it's development that's driving these costs. However, it's really interesting when you look at renovations, because if a renovation is doing a lot of changes, but it doesn't result in a change in occupancy or change in water use, then really it's not going to drive the need to upgrade a reservoir or a water main, or make the system bigger to provide water to that. And so there is an exemption under the Local Government Act, in which our bylaw is a child of anyhow, so we have to follow all those rules, is that if there is no burden to the system because of the building, then they're exempt from DCCs. But it appears that other municipalities don't do any reviewing themselves. It is the onus is on the property owner to say, hey, actually, I don't think I have to pay DCCs because we're not increasing that. And I think that from my understanding in discussion with planning and from what I've heard from this committee, is that the development cost charges and the intent here is not to put onus on the property owner if they're not doing a burden to the system. So what we talked about was actually just doing a review. And so it's just one extra step in our process when we receive an application. So if we get a building permit application for a renovation, instead of just saying, oh, it's over 50,000, DCCs are eligible, we'll charge you for DCCs. Instead, we say, well, let's see if there's a burden on the system. And so we'll do a check. And the way we've decided, the simplest, most standard way that regardless it can be applied for everyone, is that if the occupancy is 3 before the renovation and it's 3 after, then there's no additional demand on the system, because really it's the humans that use the water that drive the burden, right? That drive the demand. And so, and that's used in the building permit system for other reasons too, right? So it's a good system to use. And so what we're proposing here as a request for information is sort of, we've looked into it. I think that it's still important that we do charge for DCCs for renovations when they do put a burden on the system. So if you're basically doubling the size of your house and you're adding, 4 more rooms and you're going to have 2 families living in there, then that's twice the demand for sure. And so I think that renovations, there's a good reason why they're put together with new construction, and I think that should stay. But I think from a staff perspective, just when we're reviewing whether DCCs are applicable, it's over 50,000, the renovation. Okay, what's the occupancy? The occupancy is increased. Okay, now the DCC would be eligible for that building. So that's what staff are proposing. There are other options, which is that we could continue to just do what other municipalities do, which is that we charge for DCCs if it's over 50,000, and the onus is on the property owner to demonstrate that they're not increasing the burden. I think that will be a hassle if for each and every homeowner who decides that that's not fair and they want to argue with that, maybe get into legal questions. So there's some drawbacks to that, although there's potential for receiving more revenues if you're just blanket always charging it. The other alternative is we can update the bylaw to just not charge at all for renovations. So I don't know if that's fair because some renovations would be adding burden to the system. Therefore, I feel that DCCs would be applicable. And then the other thing is that when we update the DCC, in order to get the bylaw approved, we have to do a certain number of things, which is we have to consult with the public, and then it has to get approved by the approving officer. And so we have to do it every 5 years anyhow. It's just a lot of time and energy to do that process. So instead of, or I would say the drawback to updating the DCC bylaw right now is that it will require staff time, and we have to do it in 2023 anyhow. So we're not recommending that we do that, but it can be something that's looked at when we review the bylaw in 2023.
Any questions on that? So my understanding, what you're suggesting, that isn't one or two, is that we basically staff would inform the person that's applying that if it doesn't raise the level of occupancy, that they may be exempt. Is that correct? But we're going to inform them.
Correct. And we can update our, like, we've got an info package. So we can update the language in there, which just explains a little better when they'll be applicable, and then explain that DCCs for renovations are exempt if they don't change occupancy.
Okay. All right, Gord?
Okay, so this hypothetical question here, if a person's going to add a bedroom to their house because they have an addition to their family coming, a baby coming, so they add a bedroom there and it's less than $50,000, but the increase in the occupancy, are they going to be exempt?
They're exempt because they're under 50,000. That is an exempt.
Okay.
Anybody else? So do we just receive this, Jenny? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay. A motion to receive this report?
So moved.
A seconder? We got a seconder there?
Harold.
So, okay. Alrighty, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. And now we got the last final thing, was increasing the size of the advisory board. I mean, we've basically, the problem that we've had with adding extra people is that they don't attend. So I mean, I'm not opposed, and we do have the mandate to actually have more people on board. And I would suggest that if anybody's got somebody that is interested in actually participating, that that they refer them to me, and we'll go forward with adding a couple more people to the board. I mean, I don't have, it increases the kind of exposure and the conversation and the depth of the experience and all of those things, but the last few people that we've actually put on have not been very successful. So what is that? Sorry.
Yeah,
Wendy?
sorry. Oh, just that I sent the terms of reference to the committee. I just emailed it to everyone. So the membership right now, as it is a maximum of 7 at large from the Beaver Creek community. And right now we only have 4. So we'll bring the terms of reference to the next committee meeting in the new year. We could consider lowering it, or
So I mean,
give some thought to some people that could be nominated.
The difference of this board to a lot of other ones is I'm actually a participating, like I'm a member of the board versus the chair, and I'm voting. So and I affect the quorum, so it's a little easier to manage. But yeah, okay. So I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks. I don't know if anybody else has got somebody that they think would be interested. But yes, Gord.
Well, I noticed that Kelly Schute's name is still on there. So is he being counted as a member? Because
I believe that was an error when Tracy sent out the agenda. Right now, the membership is just that I have is John McNabb, Harold, Gord, and Pam.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was just an error. So yeah, give it some thought. If you think of anyone, just let myself and John McNabb know, and then we could take that to the board, or we could consider lowering membership next year when we review the terms of reference.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple of hands up. I got Harold and then Pam.
As it is right now, it's our maximum is 7. A quorum is 4, is it? Or 3?
So we kept that flexible. So it's the majority of members present. So right now, what with
It
only
would
4
have
on-
to be 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or 3. Anyway, it is, yeah, it's good to have, I mean, this is an advisory committee, but it is good to have at least 5, 6 members on a committee,
yes. Yeah, I think so.
preferably.
I'll maybe talk to the fire department and see if maybe they've got somebody that within their fold that might be interesting. Jenny, you want to join?
No,
You got,
thank you.
oh, I thought that's why your hand was up. Oh,
I was actually going to ask, I guess the other thing is maybe at our next, when the water bills go out, we could put an ad in there, letting everyone know that we are looking for water committee members.
okay.
That's a
And
good idea.
Pam, sorry, I walked over top of you. Pam?
Yes, that's what I was going to ask, if that was possible, just to put the word out there. There may be somebody we don't know that is willing to step forward, and we should have minimum 5 at a meeting like this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and I'll talk to the fire chief and see if there's somebody within that fold. I mean, they're kind of an important part of our water system, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to have one of them on there beside Kelly.
Yes, they really are. I mean, who's doing the fire hydrant maintenance? And there's all those issues. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes with fire flows and other things like that, you know, it doesn't necessarily get reported.
Yeah.
You know, through the regular sources. Okay, so I don't think we don't need any kind of motion on that. It's just a discussion.
Just an update.
Okay. Anybody on our system that wants to talk to us? Any questions?
There's no public participating in the meeting today, and no questions were received at our email address that we've set up. So no, there's nothing.
Okay. Any other burning issues that happen to come up while we were talking? No, Cat hasn't wanted his treats, so I'm good. He usually comes in here and begs for treats, and I got my mic on. Okay, so motion to adjourn.
Also,
Seconder, Pam,